The Budget Committee is back in session. We are at the deliberations points and discussion points in our time with this. And first of all, we had determined to have a discussion about the vehicle registration fee. And I don't know if we want to just ask our transportation folks to begin that discussion, or if there's someone who wants to lead into it. The discussion was whether or not the VRF income should be reported in this coming year's budget, or should it be handled as a supplemental budget when it does come in.
I want to hear what Dan thinks.
Okay, let's hear from Dan.
I would love to go first, unless there's a question coming right now. For the record, Dan Johnson, I'm the Director of the Department of Transportation and Development. I am joined to my left by Deidre Landon, our Administrative Services Manager. Thank you so much. That just got awkward. We are pleased to be back here talking about VRF. I love when the agenda item says basically that you are going to have a discussion around deliberations and the only topic is VRF. That kind of raised my heartbeat a little bit. But anyway, that's on your agenda for your business meetings. Exactly. Let me just set the stage really quick just so you know kind of where we were coming from originally. This discussion came up when we talked about how we were going to recognize that VRF revenue in our budget. Keep in mind, timing is important. BCC authorized the VRF in late February of this year. As of May 22nd, I believe, there was a pending referral to that VRF, which may have limited our ability to collect that or put it forward to a vote. So there were unknowns about the ability to collect those dollars. So in all honesty, not until that point in time, 6 days before your first budget meeting, did we know the referral was not going to be successful and that those dollars were going to be collected. Just kind of sets the stage on the timing of the nuances of that revenue versus the development of the budget, which we've been actively working on since January of this year. Secondly, just an acknowledgement to concerns that we had about this discussion began with the public and it's going to continue with the public. We are actively working to develop an ABC, which is a term that's familiar to our board, of citizen members that will be involved in kind of helping us guide and direct those local community funds, road funds. That effort is in process right now. In fact, I think we're doing an update to the board on the 11th of June, I believe, about how we're advancing that discussion with our community. So there was always in the back of our minds that kind of a concern about don't get the cart too far ahead of the horse, don't get too far ahead of the community about when and how you program these dollars. That's how our opinion was the fact that supplemental will be a more appropriate way to do that because we'd have more information to educate that discussion around the budget. Having said that, before you today, and the packet before you today, includes an amendment to our budget, which would include those funds. It was developed through some great work of our partners in finance. Thank you, Krista. And good work by Deidre Landon. I want to take you through 4 pages. They were just handed out to you. And these 4 pages illustrate adjustments to our presentation so you have an idea about where those dollars are going to be programmed and what line items within our various budgets we modified. First page first is programmatic page. We've worked with finance to develop under our transportation line of business. We have worked with finance to develop a specific program. That specific program is termed the Community Road Fund. VRF is the tool that raises the revenue, but it goes into this program. That's the program, Community Road Fund. It's where those dollars will be set aside. It was important that we programmatically set those dollars aside in a separate pot, an individual pot, separate from our other funds, to make sure that we can answer questions from be it elected officials, be it our community, on where those dollars, how much were raised, and where those dollars were spent. So
I just want to make sure, so you're saying the current VRF is already in there, and so we're...
No, we have not collected any VRF. Okay. I'm going to get to that in 1 second.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So just programmatically, it is separate. It's separate from our state road fund dollars, it's separate from Damascus money, et cetera.
Okay.
Page number 2. What this illustrates to you is that it now increases the amount of budget authorization prepared in our budget document, increases it from the previous number, which was $125,000, $613,513. Pardon me, $125,614,513 to the number you see there in front of you today. Basically, the 131 million. Okay? And that acknowledges the revenue that we're going to see. Now let's talk about that revenue. Page number 3. It starts, you can see in the top right-hand corner, transportation line of business, and it says Community Road Fund. That's the program that it's in. Let's talk about these numbers just for 1 second. Keep in mind, revenues, we don't believe we'll start seeing revenues until January of 2020. Okay, so this assumes a half a year's revenue, January through the end of the fiscal year. Okay, so when you see that 5.4 million, obviously it's half of what we thought was projected. The second line I'm going to draw your attention to is the material and services line. We set aside about $1 million there. That was what we had had a dialogue around a local road maintenance program. Do I think we'll be able to action that $1 million this year? That's to be determined. We don't have it programmed right now, but there could be a local road we might be able to pick up. I'm not promising you anything, but at least it allows us the ability, if a local road presented itself and we were able to get a contract out, we would be able to spend those money and it would allow us to do that. Third line is the capital outlay line, $500,000. What we've done in there is programmed about that dollar amount. The thought is if we can advance the discussion in a timely manner with our community partners, we have 38 capital projects that we can direct those dollars towards. Those come out of our transportation system plan. We're going to work to prioritize those projects with our community members. If there are 1 or 2 that may come to light by the end of the fiscal year and we can start advancing design on some of those, we would use those dollars to do so. Okay. Next line, you see special payments line, $2.1 million. The way it's structured right now is all of that, all of the revenue that is collected at the state for the entirety of all the VRF revenues in the county would come into our coffers. And then we would then distribute those dollars out to our partnering cities, and we would also have a special 10% allocation that goes into that strategic investment fund. Those dollars are identified in that line 4. That would be our dollars that were basically collected, distributed, we pay out to the cities, and that money is set aside for C4 in the strategic investment fund, which is around $555,000, right?
No, sorry. The Strategic Investment Fund money is not in the special payment category.
Oh, it's in the contingency.
That includes all cities with the exception of the city of Damascus, which we'll talk about briefly.
Which,
In just a moment.
Oh, yeah,
that's
good.
not what you told me this morning.
No, it is. The contingency is a combination of 2 things, which Dan will explain now.
I'm sorry, Deirdre, the contingency is what?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So the contingency is a combination of 2 separate pieces of money. There's the 10% strategic investment fund set aside, and there's also the remainder of the county's 50%. Sorry. So whatever we did not program in materials and services and capital outlay goes into that contingency to roll forward for the next year. But we will be assigning that strategic investment fund with a specific PeopleSoft program number so we can track it. And if we don't spend it in a specific year, we'll have that balance to use in a upcoming year on a project that Clackamas County Coordinating
rises.
Committee or
Yeah.
C4 chooses.
Our assumption is that those dollars will not be programmed this next year. So there'll be a carryover into the following year that'll have more additional revenue that could be pooled towards various projects. Let's see here. And to make note, it was stated that it has all the collection with the exception of Damascus. If you go back to our programmatic chart, you'll see that we, under transportation, have a Damascus fund.
Yes.
Before those dollars hit in this transportation, this community road fund program, we actually pull out the Damascus money and put it specifically in this Damascus program, okay? We did that to make the reporting a little bit cleaner and easier, because if we don't, it'll be double counted throughout the entirety of our budget. So basically, before any VRF revenues go into this community road fund, we pull Oregon City out, Damascus
Damascus
out, and put it within the Damascus fund, so those revenues are unique. And that is proportionate to their population, as with every other city that's out there. Okay?
May I speak on that really quick? So on the Damascus Roads Program document, you'll see that the charges for services, the $102,500 is in blue. You'll also see that the contingency number is now in blue. That's because we took the $102,500, their 6-month collections, brought it into the revenue, and then placed it in contingency because we don't know where that would be programmed quite yet in the Damascus area. We also added a note into the narrative below that is shown in blue that explains essentially what we did and how much collections we're assuming there.
So a couple things that we just don't know yet. I mean, obviously, we haven't had a chance to engage the community. There's to establish some of the priorities, so you don't see a huge capital outlay as a part of these dollars yet. Secondly, there's probably going to be some overhead charges. So we're trying to talk with the state of Oregon to keep their overhead charges to a minimum. There will probably be some transfer charges that are needed as a part of our distribution of these funds. Pretty minimal costs, but they don't represent that yet. So there may have to be some adjustments to these in the upcoming fiscal year, but we'll have to kind of play that out and see how it develops.
Yeah. Well, and like everything, it's an estimate anyhow.
That concludes our presentation.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I was so engrossed in the discussion that I'm not sure who came first or who came second
First.
on any of this, but Ms. Coldwell is first.
Thank you. I really appreciate this work that you've done and the level of detail that you've pulled together in just a few days. That was not my intention, that you had to go to that level of detail. This is strictly a budget geek thing, that we had to have increase the size of the pie to account for this money, since we know about it at this point. But, you know, appreciating the fact that you haven't necessarily finished your processes for programming it or all of your communications with the public. I appreciate that. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't restrict Clackamas County from being able to spend this money next year, because as I bored all these people with already,
I know, it's been
you
great.
can't use a supplemental budget to add money that you knew about at the time you adopted the budget. So I'm just trying to do this as a favor to you. I appreciate all this work you did, and I, all right, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Extend those things to our partners over in finance who spent a number of hours
Yeah,
working this
yeah.
up with us.
And I was including them in that too, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, how about Bernard, Commissioner Bernard, Mr. Feely, and Commissioner Savas?
So I really don't have anything on the VRF. I'm just getting in line for the discussion after.
Okay, well
And
then I'm
this would-
going to skip you.
This would be an amendment to the budget,
Yeah, right.
which would have to be.
So we'd have
included
to
in
be
the-
sure and phrase that in any budget adoption.
Do we have a motion written already?
Working on it, or
Okay.
they may have it now, but
Should-
I asked staff for
Should,
that
okay.
Thank
a
you.
brief time ago.
Should we
Mr.
get
Feely?
there?
Thank you. I just want to thank staff and Dan for doing this as well. I had a conversation with Dan last night, or yesterday afternoon, I guess, and just the fact that from a transparency standpoint, it was important this be budgeted, even if it was just budgeted as a single number somewhere in the budget. So like Sean mentioned, it is more detailed, but that's great. And I'd be happy to make a motion to amend the budget when the appropriate
When
time
the time
comes.
comes. Thank you. God, I keep doing that. Commissioner Savas, sir.
Yes. Deidre, I'm going to seize this moment. It has nothing to do with the VRF, but you have your budget book in front of you, and I might ask my colleagues to flip to tab 2, page 5. And I have a question for you. This is I kind of referenced earlier this morning, my conversation with Sheriff Roberts. You weren't here this morning, but on page 5 of tab 2, there is a listing of the FTE added, or not FTE, but the FTE counts in the departments.
We don't have your packet.
Oh,
We
you
need a
don't?
copy of it? Yeah. Okay, sorry.
Okay, so you'll see the line there for transportation development.
Yep.
Okay, and it was in 16-17, it was 265.
Yep.
Okay, and that's now 301.59. Okay, the question is, I'm sure that that's not all general fund, or maybe none of it's general fund. Could you just identify, is any of that general fund? I think the concern, the
She's gonna-
conversation I had with the sheriff is that there were a range of between 120, I think his number was 161. I think the administrator's number is 123 added positions. I think there was a assumption those were all general funded positions.
We don't have it on there. No, the majority are not.
Okay.
One thing I want to note, though, there is an increase, and you see that increase in kind of that 18, 19, 19, 20. A portion of that is the transfer of the discussion around fleet. If you recall, we have added some additional staff there. If you look at the totality, our total number right now is running around 300 and, I think our budget was 303 in total.
With the embedded.
With the embedded. And if you look at those numbers, if you think about programs that have, it's hard to correlate them specifically to general fund dollars because we mix some dollars in our fund. So building services has no, which is,
We
we
can
run through
talk
this?
about those that do, yeah. I mean, we have it by program, if that's helpful.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so this would be, this is where we were, and this is what we're proposing, so you can see the change.
But let's just talk about the ones that have general funds associated with them. So our first one is dog services, has general fund dollars with it. They have a total FTE count of 20.3.
And they were at that, because that's kind of, are you asking about the change from
Prior years.
2016, 17 to what we have budgeted now? Right.
A simple question is, that at least in that period of time, are any of those funded like with general fund?
None of them would be wholly funded by general fund. They would have some fees, fines, and other funding sources associated with them. But some of the programs, and not a lot, some of the programs that did add a couple FTE do receive some general fund support. And so we could talk to that if you would like.
Okay, just give me just a rough estimate of what you think the total FTE count combined would be of general fund and that number. Just, nothing I'll hold you to. It's on tape, so.
The one program that we do have that is fully general fund is county surveyor. And that went from 7.5 FTE to 8
Okay,
in that period of time. A majority of those changes probably were transportation maintenance through the road fund and through building codes in our land use and development group. Dog services went from about 18.3 to 20.3 employees in that period of time. They're not all of those positions are filled right now, as we discussed during the budget presentation. We have 2 that are still vacant, so right now the FTE count is about the same as far as filled positions. We have in code enforcement, it went from 5 to 7.05. One of those is a marijuana-funded position, coming from that revenue. And then we did add another position there. And then the land use development and review and permitting is a tough one. That has so many funds included in it that the general fund support is really minimal in that group. And that one actually went down. So I predicated that and really didn't need to. It went from 77 down to 76.65.
so a total of a few.
But if you think,
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I was talking to you or her, if you were talking about a total of 3,
There may be a comment here on a simpler way to determine. Did you have something to say to that, Commissioner Humberston?
change of 5. So for those, yeah, just, go
I
ahead.
added up these figures, it comes up to around 123 new employees since 16, 17. Simple way of asking the question is, how many were general fund? Do we know the answer to that question? Because I think that's
But that's throughout the
that's
entire
relative.
county.
I know, it's throughout the entire county.
Right.
But I think that's relative to the concern that the sheriff raised in many of our programs are specialty funded, and it's the special funds that pay for those employees, which is completely different than general fund. So, and since the sheriff himself is funded out of general fund, that seems to me to be where the relative,
So that question is very specific. And
I
could-
realize that.
But, well, it's very specific in the fact that you assume we allocate our general fund dollars specifically towards FTE. It's a totality of revenues that come into a program. And so when you're asking that question, it isn't, I can't look, and we can go back and do an analysis of that and say theoretically what that rough number is. But right now, if you look at a total FTE increase, if you look at the total FTEs, look at our budget alone, it's $133 million. 4.5% is general fund. that tells you and it's 300 employees. So that tells you right now roughly, it's a minuscule number
Right.
that go into direct allocation towards positions.
Yeah.
I hate saying a specific number. I mean, we looked at
So it'd be 3.05, two of which are unfilled.
from the change, 3.05, 2 of which are unfilled.
Okay, that's all I need. Thank you.
Okay.
You did your job. Excellent.
So we'll do.
Ms. Caldwell, and then,
From
yeah,
physics next.
okay. Ms. Caldwell.
Yeah, just,
still wanna
I wasn't
say
sure if
something?
we were going to continue with the motor vehicle registration fee conversation before we move on to other items, but I would move
I think we
approval.
probably exhausted the motor vehicle registration
I would
fee.
move approval of an amendment to the proposed budget in the amount of $5,436,706 in motor vehicle registration fee revenue and an equal number of expenditures as outlined by Transportation and Development.
And I'd second that amendment.
Can I just point it?
Yes?
I'm not sure if I can say point of order on my position. I think we also have to make a corresponding amendment. Was that right?
I think
Hey, nice job. Check me out, Krista. We have to make a corresponding amendment to the Damascus Roads program, because it has an equal change in there. That was the
you.
last page I sent you, which would increase those dollars.
Is that all contained in one amendment, or is that two separate amendments? Anybody?
I think it could be one,
We'll include
one
it.
amendment because they cancel each other out.
And help me with the number I'm looking for. Oh, and
There's-
an additional allocation of $1,015,000.
106.
$102,500, so the one in blue up above in the revenue for Damascus Roads.
And an additional amendment for, an additional appropriation for $102,500
Yes.
going to the Damascus Roads program.
So why the Damascus
second
Road
that.
program? Huh?
Oh.
Why the
Must be
Damascus?
something you
Because
guys
it may be a
decided.
city again? Is that why? Or is that money left over?
It's the distribution. We're honoring the same process we did with the disincorporation of Damascus, where we have set aside for their road funding.
Okay, so.
So we're putting that
But this
money
is
in-
only this year. Unless it be, why would we do this then? They're no better than
It was
anybody.
mandated, there was a discussion around 10 years from the date of
Okay.
disincorporation.
That's all I need to
That
know.
that had to be programmed specifically for that area, which is what we're doing with these funds for Damascus.
Okay, I get it.
Okay,
So-
and so is your full motion
wrote it
seconded by
down,
the
I
second?
assume?
Yes, I seconded the
Yes, so we had a
full
vote on
motion,
it.
including
Okay,
Damascus.
I'm not sure I have all the correct wording, but help me out here. So it's been moved that that there be an amendment to the 1920 fiscal year budget under Transportation's line of business community road fund of $5,436,706, and also to the Damascus Roads program of
102,500.
100 million.
102,000.
102,000, I don't see that
500.
number here. 102,000,
500
yeah, that number.
and associated expenditures.
And associated expenditures.
Any further discussion?
I got that part. It's been moved and seconded, so, any other discussion on the vehicle registration fee? Mr. Commissioner Savis?
Not on this.
All right, thank you. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passed. Thank you. May I ask a point of order question? When we ultimately adopt the 1920 budget, do we need to restate that or just say the amended budget? As amended.
We're approving, not adopting.
Right, you're approving that amendment, so do I,
We're approving the budget, we're not adopting
No, I know that, but when we get to the point where we're adopting the budget, do I have to repeat that
No.
specifically? I
No,
can just say
it's
the
as
budget
amended,
as
And
amended.
any other amendments you're about to
Got
make.
it. That's what I just wanted, I know, but I just wanted to make sure that doesn't say as amended.
It does.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, today,
Oh, yeah, got it.
we are
Okay.
approving the budget, not adopting.
Have we made the determination?
No, we are approving it and moving it on to the Board of County Commissioners for adoption.
So I've had mine up for a while.
Well, I asked you once and you
Well,
said you're.
now it's
opposed-
time, because we
Okay,
got this
now
one
it's
out of the
time.
way.
May I ask a question
Yeah.
first? If
Can I release
you're
my name?
like thinking about making a, you know.
No, not a
So-
final one.
Okay, so first of all, are we finished with Dan and Deirdre?
Yes.
You guys, thank you for coming back.
Out of here.
Thank you, Dan.
And-
I'm almost sorry I brought it up.
No,
Did
it's
all that
great.
work.
And I would like to make sure that if there are questions for the sheriff's department, that we have an opportunity to ask those questions or ask for additional information, because we have 3 members of the sheriff's department, 3 or more, that are here in case we need more information from them. So,
Mine's very quick.
all right, thank you. I will turn it over to you, sir.
And so I move that we reduce the small grants to $250,000 and contribute 50,000 to children of incarcerated parents.
Second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded to reduce the small grants program for this coming year to $250,000 and set aside the original additional $50,000 of that for the children of incarcerated parents.
That's correct.
Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. Motion carries. Okay. And Mr. Feely.
I think Commissioner Savas is
Oh, I'm so
next.
sorry. Commissioner Savas.
Well, I was gonna suggest that we get the sheriff's staff up at the table, so we are on the same wavelength. I do have some questions, number one, that I've got, and also some clarification posed by discussion I had with Sheriff Roberts this morning, which I think Jen is prepared to talk about.
Krista.
Budget Committee, I'm sorry, I was attending to another issue while you were making that last motion. I believe we need to go back and take a look at the non-departmental budget where it has the appropriation for the small grants program. I believe it was already budgeted at $250,000. So let me take a moment to verify that dollar amount for you.
Okay, thank you. Because what we had heard,
Checked the other day, it was 3.
yeah, what we had heard was 300,000.
So that's an error on my part, and it should have been 300,000, so I apologize to the finance staff, so we'll fix it on our end.
Okay.
All right. So our motion stands then at the moment. Okay. Okay, Sheriff's Department personnel, thank you for taking the time to come back on a Tuesday afternoon. We appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So, Chair Parks, would you like sheriff staff to proceed, or would you like, how would you like this to start?
No, thank you, Commissioner Savas. You had mentioned that you had some questions, some queries of them. I'm not sure that anybody else does, so let's just dive in with what you need from them yet.
Okay, I'll do I think it's the easy part. Jenna, you listened to the conversation. You and I have been emailing today.
Yes.
And based from the conversation I had with Sheriff Roberts this morning. So on that page that Haley handed you a copy of with the FTE.
She did not hand it to me.
Oh, Dan Johnson. Oh, I'm sorry. I showed, but yeah, I didn't have a copy of that. So what's on this page, and you'll have the copy here momentarily, is that DTDs of that 35, I think their estimate is just a little over 3 of that is general fund funded, okay? And the line below that is health, housing, human services. Now, they're not here right now, but a substantial amount of their budget is not general fund,
Sure.
okay? I'm sure there's probably a couple or few FTE maybe in that, but I wanted to, number one, see if that clarifies. There's two issues here. Number one, I think the sheriff was under the impression that all of these were general fund funded
No,
positions.
he was not.
And the other one was that the count was 161, not 123.
So I have, and I don't know if we have copies of this, but this was something that we contacted Heather Pedersen with Human Resources, and we asked for just 10 years actually worth of data on the positions within the county. So HR gave us numbers. We just looked at the last 4 years because I feel like if you go back too far, you kind of lose relevancy. So we went back just the last 4 years, and the numbers that we have are from HR. They don't match. That's clear. I don't know why they don't match. I know that there's a lot of discussion that Nancy has had that the finance numbers don't match, the HR numbers don't match our numbers. I don't know why that is. I don't know that that's for me to explain. But what I can tell you is what we did come up with, or from the HR numbers were that as of, and these were July 1 numbers, so July 1 of 2015, 16, 17, 18. I know that, during the years, additional positions are cut and added. So we went with the July 1 numbers because that's what HR had. And their information was that 160.9, so 161 essentially, positions have been added over the last 4 years. I did, after you and I had the discussion with Sheriff Roberts, because we brought this information to you, I did go back and ask finance how many of these are, and I believe I talked about this on Thursday, but how many of these are general funded? And they were not able to get me that information. So this was not a declaration. This was more of a, here's what we found, and so it's something to look further into.
Okay.
What's the relevance of this? I'm confused. Paul, what's the relevance of
I
this?
can't necessarily speak per se on behalf of the sheriff, but I think it was in response to, the pressure or the facing the uphill battle of funding the positions in the future on a sustainable basis that, he's suggested that the next fiscal year that there be cuts, FTE cuts or whatever it may be, whatever the cuts are. I don't think we suggest necessarily they're FTE cuts, but how we close that gap on the 5.5 suggested one-time funding that's contained in the administrator's budget message. So I think facing that, I think that the sheriff's response, I believe, I'm not quoting him, but I believe is that, you need to look at that as well. You added staff as well. And I said, well, you're justified. Because it was last year we sat here at this time and the administrator and the finance director and a number of people were validating that they were 110% sure that the budget forecast we had before us was correct. And today we realized the work that staff has done, finance staff, is that it's $11 million and some change off the forecast. So that's one aspect of this, and I'm going to use that as a segue into the most important part. So the forecast is off. It's now been relatively corrected. We think we have a decent forecast, as accurate as that can be. The other part of this, of the equation is that, and the question I had that maybe these staff can help with is that why did the budget for the sheriff's office last year at 90 million, which is on the very last page, is now 99 million and some change? So it's a delta of $8-something million. Can we explain that in enough detail that I can understand it? Because I still don't have a line by line or item for item basis, but that's a huge jump. And it's out of touch with previous ramp ups of the budget's office. So without that answer, I don't know that we ought to be providing one-time funding for something we haven't identified in the first place, what that $8.5–9 million is all about.
Is that 5.5 million included in that?
Well,
would seem that it
that's a
would be.
patchwork of money to make it balance.
Yeah, and then the other increases in personnel that we had expected it to be much lower, and it was a higher percentage overall throughout the entire county.
And you have to go to tab 18, last page on tab 18, and you can see what I'm talking about.
Yes, so if I may, tab 18, the sheriff's budget, page, looks like page 8, it's the second to the last page. And if you look in the column, the change in prior budget year from 1819 to 1920, it's entirely personnel services. $7.0 million is the change from the current fiscal year to the next fiscal year. Part of that is finally fully staffed, is that the right term, or fully hired? Fully hired. Fully hired, and the regular cost of living increases, benefit increases that every department is facing. So I would say that, to me, that explains it, if you have further data to add, but it's really
Wouldn't that-
personnel services.
Wouldn't that also include the 6 that we hired throughout this last
Yes, the
fiscal
ones we
year
just did, yeah.
Yes,
jail beds.
to open the jail beds?
Right.
it does. And additional
That
costs,
wasn't in last year's budget.
pardon me, Madam Chair. Additional cost increases are the cost allocations themselves as well that went up for this fund by almost 885,000, which translates to about 24%. And then additionally, the increase, I just want to point out for clarification, the amended 2018-19 budget, which would include all those additional funds for the jail bed positions, is 92.4 million. So the increase is approximately, just doing rough math, 7.3 million, of which the bulk of that is just the increase in personal services. And what I'd like to point out is that the positions that we have had budgeted over time, and because we've had those vacancies, they aren't as expensive, if you will, as a position that's filled by an individual. So there's a salary put in there, there's a rough cost for benefits, but actually having that staffed is an increase as well. So what you're seeing here is the fruition of the increase of personal services over time, so our staff. Additionally, for at least the last 3 fiscal years, we've had to reduce fringe at the beginning of the fiscal year in order to balance our budget. And that means that we cut it out. So that doesn't mean that the cost for the fringe goes away. And when we reach year end this year and you look at our actual costs, you will see that we're overspent in fringe considerably. That's because we had to reduce it at the beginning of the year to propose a balanced budget. So the jump isn't as significant as it appears on paper. It just actually looks at, okay, so we didn't have fringe built in, so this year it was 1.8 million. So if you were to add back the 1.8 million to that 92 million, we'd be a lot closer to that 99. But regardless, the increase, the bulk of it, like 90% of it, is personnel costs.
Okay, so on that note, Nancy, if I look down there under, again, on the last page with the 90 million for the fiscal year 18-19 projected, you go all the way down to the bottom and it says 440 FTE, right? And that's under the 90,444,000.
I follow where you're at.
Okay, so you move one column over to the right, and that's the $99 million, and you go down, you have 462. So that's 22 positions additional, correct? That does not add up to $9 million or $8.5 million.
No, it's not additional, it's ongoing. So it's all of the staff. It's not, so we're not saying that the additional staff costs $9 million. We're saying that year to year, I mean, our increase alone in benefits and employee salaries was $5.5 million for our existing staff. Actually, it was almost $7 million. So I guess I don't understand your question.
Well, so if we look, and again, if you go back and you look at the other fiscal years, okay, just go back, look at the blue line, 85 million, 87 million, 89 million. You've gone up about a couple $1 million a year, each year in revenue, okay? Now you have a spike of over $8 million. So then, which is a general fund contribution. If you look at the expenditure line, it's 83 million, 88 million, 82 million, or 92 million. You've gone up $3-4 million, and then it spikes. It spikes by $8 million. So why the spike? It's not consistent.
Right, so for this year, I'm sorry, I don't know a different way to explain it. So the majority of the cost is personal services, so that's our people. There are other things within our budget that go up annually. That includes our CCOM charges, that contract, the contract for jail medical. So it's not entirely people, but the bulk of it, if you were to look at the increase year over year, 10% is for the cost of people. So we've added 6 for the jail beds. We've added a couple deputies here and there that are reimbursed from the cities and from other contracts. So again, when we're looking at just the increase, you have to look at the revenue side as well. And I can crunch some of those numbers for you if you'd like to see it, but it's not all burden upon the general fund or upon the sheriff's office, because the bulk of what we've added, 75% of what we've added in the last 4 years have been reimbursed positions.
So we're on an unsustainable path, as we know. We have a one time embedded in the budget message here, a one-time 5.5. What do you foresee the additional cost 1 year from now for those personnel costs and all the other things that you're attributing? Would it be another 8 or 9 million, or will it be 6 or 7 million?
I think we'll level off because we had the big hiring period of time, right? So we went from okay, we're looking at this incremental increase year over year and it's staying somewhat consistent. I think it'll be less than that next year. But also, some of the things that we've mentioned as well that will be a contributing factor are, there are 2 large groups of sworn staff that are eligible to retire in the next couple of years. So when we look at refilling those positions, we can assume a certain portion will be lateral, but a lot of those positions will be recruits. So the salaries for those positions, the benefits for those positions will be considerably less. So we're looking at the peak of staffing, being fully staffed, being staffed by seasoned employees. So our costs now are about as high as they're ever going to be. So we will see some relief, not that we want people to retire, but we will see some relief when they do retire, when they become eligible. But beyond that, I think the issue, as the county administrator has said, is that we're going to work together next year and figure out what will work. We've come before this body for the last 5 fiscal years saying that once we get to full staffing, we know we can't sustain those positions and the materials and services. It's not a matter of us overextending ourselves or overspending the budget. It's just that the positions and the funding for them haven't really kept pace. So we're looking at positions that are several years back in terms of what is the actual cost, how much is actually apportioned to the sheriff's office for those positions. So there's a lot of different factors that go into this issue. And it's certainly something that we look forward to working with county administration and finance next year to find what is sustainable for us.
Yeah, I guess that my concern is that we increase the budget this one time, and then next year we'll have to go back and cut that budget. And I don't want to have to come back and cut the sheriff's budget.
Neither do we.
Back down to, let's just say, take the 5.5 off, because it says one-time funding, and we'll be cutting it by that amount of money. And then we'll also be facing the uphill increase in all those costs for personnel and everything else we associated. So that's the part, and this is not your fault. So
No,
I'm not,
understood.
Yeah. And you know, I mean, we all know that you were asked to fully staff. So this is not faulting anyone in the sheriff's department whatsoever. But it's more along the lines of how do we get in front of this, because we're going to burn just on this just on this portion, the sheriff's portion of the one-time funding, we're going to burn $5.5 million.
I understand.
Right. And
Right.
if we can avoid that, that'd be great. So my hope is, and I don't have everyone here around the table, but I have a proposal. But until everyone's around the table, I'll wait to pitch that out when everyone's back.
Okay, and if I may, just one additional point. I think what this budget for 1920 tells us is the actual cost of having a fully staffed sheriff's office with the positions we currently have allocated. And as Captain Eby and Captain Rhodes stated last Thursday, the funding level at which we're currently funded and the number of equivalent FTE is grossly inadequate. So for consideration of a discussion of any nature that talks about cutting, I would just like you all to keep that in mind as well. We're woefully behind in staffing, and to further reduce that is dangerous to those who are out on the road serving citizens.
Very good. Thank you. And I think one of our #1 goals is safety of our citizens, so we appreciate the work that you do. I appreciate that you came back this afternoon.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I don't think there are other questions for you, but you might want to hang out for a minute. So let's see, Mr.
Stand by.
Feely has his card up, and and Commissioner Humberston has his card up. So
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I do believe there's a way forward to approve this budget and defer some very difficult decisions into next fiscal year as the county administrator has proposed. I think, and this is in the framework document I sent you out Sunday evening, and it is in your packet. It's unfortunately dated August 2nd. I guess I was thinking ahead.
I
but
knew
it
that
was-
should be
It was June 2nd.
a 6, yeah.
I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I do want to hit some highlights. I think we definitely need to recognize that this budget is a bridge budget that takes the county through next fiscal year. It is unsustainable after that point. I mean, we are clear about that. The administrator's been clear about that. You cannot do this budget again because of the use of one-time money, and as we all know, one-time money is one time and you spend it and it's gone. It's like
Yeah.
no time money at that point. The administrator asked us to approve this budget with a clear understanding that the work mentioned to close the gap, reduce expenditures will begin soon. And he is, well as we know, it needs to begin almost immediately. I know you like to say 13 months, but you have to present your proposed budget in like 11 months, so.
Yes.
And it needs to be done in time for the proposed budget. I don't see any viable alternative right now. We can throw this budget up in the air and throw all the pages on the floor and try and reconstruct it. We're not going to be able to do that. I mean,
No.
it's just impossible. We've sat through all the hearings. We've had public hearings. My recommendation, it's not a motion yet, but is to approve the budget with the understanding that we go through this process and that we not only look at ways to reduce expenditures, but we look at ways to increase revenues. For every dollar of revenue you bring in, that's one less dollar in expenditure you have to cut. I also attempted in this to include all the issues we heard about, and a lot of them aren't even up on the board. But we've heard, and we talked this morning a little bit about all the technology improvements that need to take place. Those need to be captured and maybe some way of financing those, especially if they result in efficiencies, like ongoing staff reduction or just ongoing reductions in expenditures. There's a lot of capital needs, some of which have been identified, not all have, but you can leverage some of those. We did talk about certain revenues, business license fee, a children's levy, increased cost recovery that came up early on, other things that are listed here. And we talked about right sizing. Gary calls it zero base. I just can't, but that's a personal issue. We just need to recognize that will be an exhaustive effort. Because quite frankly, I mean, I guess I wasn't surprised, but we heard from a lot of people about service gaps. We just heard Nancy talking about inadequate staffing in the sheriff's office. So cutting is going to be difficult. The H3S people, I mean, painted a pretty grim picture of what their current budget can provide going forward. And this would all be under the guise, under the direction of your current strategic directions as a part of Performance Clackamas, as well as the specific plans that have been developed by the various departments. I do talk a little bit, and I mentioned it this morning when Krista was here, still here, about the importance of accurate forecasting. And I don't need to beat that one too hard because we now know. But there are tools out there, there's staff out there that can really add to that effort. And a county of this size needs that now. It just needs it. So, I mean, that's basically it. So,
Thank you very much.
but
Mr.
bottom
Yeah.
line, there's a way forward. This is not impossible.
It's not gloom and doom.
No, I mean,
It's
have time. I mean, you have a limited period of time.
It's an opportunity.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's an
thank you.
opportunity.
So Commissioner Bernard and then Commissioner Humberston.
I was just going to add that you have to also consider this, but with caution, is that the legislature's moves on PERS will stimulate retirements, guaranteed.
Yeah.
The other thing is that if it's upheld in court, I heard $20 million difference. Those are things that I wouldn't depend on, but could have a major impact on the future. But I guarantee you the PERS thing will definitely, there'll be a number of retirements very soon. So I think that has to be considered too.
It's a good point. Thank you. Commissioner Humberston?
I agree with Mr. Feely, and I think, thank you. I agree with Mr. Feely, and I think that Mr. Schmidt's proposal going forward is the way for us to go with the budget. Give him the opportunity to work with his team, work with the sheriff's department, see where cuts can be made as much as possible. Hopefully, we wouldn't be cutting street services, those direct services, but maybe, maybe temporary jobs and things of that nature can be cut back and help our budget. But I think that's a discussion that should be held at that level, quite frankly. So you guys can work those things out. I think you're correct that PERS is an unknown, but it's potentially a very positive unknown. And until we really know, we may end up having to do kind of a two-track evaluation of the budget. One, PERS decision stands and is successful, and that money comes in. And the second track is it doesn't, and this is what we'll need to do to compensate for it. But again, we're not going to solve that here. And as you so eloquently put it, we could throw the budget up in the air and sit here for 3 hours, but we're not going to fix the problem that you and your staff have addressed, that have indicated is there, and I think you need the opportunity and time to get it fixed.
Ken, I think you should clarify the PERS amendments may be good for the county, but they're not necessarily good for the retirees.
Well, I understand that, and I also expect that there will probably be a challenge on that, and I understand the reasons why, but.
And hence the two-track budget.
Yeah, and hence the two-track budget. We may have to look at it that way. Would I have necessarily supported the decision that they made? I can't say that I would, but it's been made, and so if that's what happens, then that does change the calculation for this county. That's the facts of the matter.
Thank you. Does anyone have any other specific questions for our members of the Sheriff's Office that are here? Commissioner Fisher?
No, I have a comment about public
And then
safety and just the overall general conversation, so I'll say it while the Sheriff's Office is here. As we go forward and look at how are we going to be sustainable as a county, I think we need to look broadly, look at all the assumptions, including how do we measure allocated costs? These are budget techniques. How do we look at vacancy rates? What are the basic assumptions of which we're doing our budgeting? Look at it all broadly. And when I look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs and where public safety is the most important foundation, we can't be looking at the Sheriff's Office in isolation to say, how are you going to be sustainable? You have a $5.5 million backfill this year. How are you going to? We have to look, what is it that we want for our community? How are we going to be promoting public safety, and how are we looking at this big picture? And I, for one, am not interested in reducing the public safety budgets because I'm concerned for public safety. Our Sheriff's Office does an excellent job in so many ways. I hear praises upon praises from people in the community. I get concerned about that. So just as a big picture view and moving forward, I just wanted to make those comments.
Thank you.
Are you gonna, do you have any other questions?
Not for the staff, not for the
So I
sheriff's
just
staff.
wanted to add something. Again, I don't think you can generalize and say public safety. I think you say boots on the ground. It's more important to have people on the road, on the ground, in the jail than it is perhaps on the management level. Sorry, management. So it could be top heavy.
Get out there and run a few shifts.
We can't, it's not our responsibility going to your organization, say you're top heavy or not. That's yours, but, and a decision you guys ought to make in the future. But boots on the ground, on the roads, in the cars, on the motorcycles, in the courts rooms, and in the jail is the most important thing for public safety. So
Thank
that's-
you. Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, I don't have any further questions for the sheriff's staff, but I would agree that public safety is the larger umbrella of all those things. I won't repeat it, but, and I think I've shared with the sheriff on Thursday, when he was here, that we need to take a more holistic look on how we fund public safety and identify the public safety system in a way that fills the gap that we foresee. It's simply inadequate. It's inadequate today, even with this $5.5 million patch. We need to figure out a bigger way on behalf of the children that are out there that are homeless, the children whether they're children of incarcerated parents or whether they're victims of domestic violence, whatever it may be, is that we've got a lot of gaps, and it's important that we figure out an answer to that. I have my card up. In regard to a number of the unanswered questions, I'm going to take the easiest one. On Thursday evening, we had the folks from Northwest Housing Alternatives just up on the board, and I was just asked Gary, did we figure out what that funding was that the Annie Ross House was originally funded, or do we have a solution for that?
Do you remember the question?
No.
It
They
was,
thought
they
they were
thought that they
getting
were gonna
cut.
get a cut base.
All right, it was a
It was for the shelter.
RFP. Right.
Haven't heard back from Rod yet.
We reached out to staff and haven't heard back yet, so we will try and reach them right now and get that information for you.
Okay. The law library is the other one. The law library, they made an appeal. Do they have what they need, or do we need any adjustment between now and then?
They have what they need for this upcoming fiscal year. They're asking for support in starting July 2020 and beyond.
Okay.
And there's legislation moving through that increases their compensation.
There is,
And
yes.
I had that on my list.
Yeah, good, yeah. Okay,
Okay, the other issue was the courthouse. Originally, in the original budget, we had a carve-out for some money, 2.8 million for 2 years. That's been withdrawn, correct? So what do we have for a strategy coping with that, that gap, if you will, if indeed the voters support the funding of the courthouse?
Well, I will say, even if we were to be successful in a general obligation bond, we wouldn't get that money in this current upcoming fiscal year. It would be in July 2020 after. So, I mean, Laurel mentioned that in her presentation. We have a courthouse leadership team meeting this Thursday to brief you on where we're at. I'll say it, we're not prepared to go to the ballot in November 2019. That's our staff recommendation to the Board of Commissioners. We'll look at a potential ask in May 2020 or November 2020 for a general obligation bond. There are other funding options available as well. But the point, to answer your question, Commissioner, is we have the resources we need for this next fiscal year for contract support, for design work, and it all depends on what we get in Salem in the next 30 days. That will really make the decision for us on how we go forward. So I feel we have the resources we need for this upcoming fiscal year as we help make decisions on how we're going forward to fund this. Do you have anything you want to add?
I do. We had put in $2.8 million for debt service for this next year. But as things have turned out, we aren't going to be contracting as soon as we thought that we were. The actual money doesn't come from Salem until the end of the biennium. So we have to pay out again. We have to pay out double to get reimbursed half. So we knew that we would have to probably do bond anticipation notes or something. If we do bond anticipation notes, that's fine, but we have to follow them up with a bond. And but then you don't have to pay right away. So we looked at it. We said, okay, we'll look at this later on when we know more, because we don't know enough now, but we did retain $800,000 to get us through with the communications contracts, the survey contracts, some of the other contracts, the costing contract, some of those other supportive things until we know what we need to have, and we're ready to go for maybe a bond anticipation note or some bridge funding. So we'll be having to sort of play that out in real time, because we don't know what that cost is going to be at this point. Does that help?
Yeah, that does. And I'm hoping that we can have a meeting with the Board of County Commissioners on that, because I've been out of the loop at least, and I don't think I missed a meeting on the courthouse, but I think it's a good time to get a refresher where we are on that, because it's been a long time.
Yep.
And I'm getting a lot of questions which I don't feel I can even answer. I'm even asked to even speak to it, and I don't even,
Sure.
I'm not as as ingrained with this as Commissioner Fisher and Commissioner Bernard are. So I know
Yes.
they're the point people on that, so.
Usually after we have a leadership team meeting, we have a Board of Commissioners update. We have a Board of Commissioners policy session scheduled for the 18th for a specific issue, and it'll probably be after that that we do a general one, and financing and contracting will be on that list.
So my question I have now for the administrator is Gary, you and I chatted, and I'm kind of concerned. I appreciate Mr. Feely. Well, it's not that much different than what your approach is or strategy in your budget message, but what do we think is going to compel the departments in which they're headed by an elected official? What's going to compel them to engage July 1st in a zero-based budgeting process?
Well, I hope by asking politely and kindly that they would graciously do that. I'm kidding. They don't have a choice. I mean, you approve their budgets. We're in an unsustainable budget. It serves them to work together with all staff, multi-departmental, to come to a solution. I believe that will occur on the conversations I've had with the departments led by elected officials. I have hope and faith within them that they'll work together collaboratively. I can't force them. Ultimately, it's your decision. You approve their budgets. But we have to work together. So I'm using it on hope and faith that we will have a collaborative working relationship.
Okay. Well, I'd like to make a proposal, but Commissioner Schrader's had her card up for a while, and Mr. Feely now has his card up, so I'd like to,
I can wait.
hear them, and then I'll make my
I'm
proposal.
on a different,
Okay.
I can wait.
So considering, I am kind of concerned about our ability to compel those folks to participate, and I'm also don't want to put in a position of cutting anyone's budget. And I think that from what I heard from the sheriff's staff and the sheriff, is that with their retirements, we may not even need the 5.5 million one-time funding, that maybe they only need a portion of that. So my proposal is, and it's basically a concept, and the concept is that we don't approve the one-time funding, and we simply we just go out, start the zero-based budgeting now, or July 1st, and we amend the budget as necessary to fill the gaps going forward. And not only will that put us in a position of getting to a solution fast, because I think we ought to be working with the largest budget deficit first, if you want to call it that, this one-time funding, that we start with the sheriff's budget because of the size of it. And we won't need to budget that much money. And we can come to a solution sooner rather than later. And I just don't want to see, I just don't think that we ought to be put in a position where we just simply make the presumption and set ourselves up for burning $5.8 million of one-time funding. That's my concern. And that's my concept.
Thank you. Commissioner Schrader.
I'm just going to point out, I don't know if we're going to make a motion and decision today on the budget, but I wanted to point out the report that we got from the Regional Arts and Culture Council. And if we want to continue funding at that level, again, it's a narrative, but I'm not seeing the math of how, with the assertion that we're getting a 395% return on our county's investment.
The return is listed, I believe, on the backside
On
of
the,
that.
on the second page.
Yeah, on the second page.
All told,
And
RAC delivers a 395.
I believe that, if I heard correctly, that's in Arts and Cultural Affairs
Right, that's the
budget.
tourism. And it comes through, it's a pass-through through tourism. So I would just like to get some clarity on that, because I'm not seeing it. And I'm a big supporter of the arts. And when I look at the dollars that we're giving, that are being passed through to Clackamas County organizations, sometimes I wonder if we might be better just, again, putting that into small grants and having an arts component to small grants.
Well, if I understand correctly, and I don't have that sheet in front of me, we get back close to about 400,000 or
Yeah.
350,000 of value for the 100,000 that we provide
That's
for
what
them.
that's what I'm trying to.
So it would cost us,
assess.
as a county, considerably more to try to do it
Well,
ourselves.
this is what they
Well,
give.
there is a
They
little,
just, yeah, I didn't.
there is a little list
There's a
on
list.
here.
Yeah, okay.
It's the Arrowhurst and stuff like that.
bullet.
That's why I said it was on the, you know.
You know, for me, the biggest issue about this isn't the money, and I believe the return. It's that kids who can't afford it can't take it.
That's
Because
the
it
thing that
requires a
bothers me.
payment.
Right.
That's what bothers me about it. I would,
Is that with the Right Brain Initiative? Yeah.
Yes, that's the thing that bothers me about
and if
it.
you recall, those were the comments that we very strongly mentioned to the gentleman who represented RAC. And
And he explained why.
right, and my hope would be that they would look for sponsors or grants or whatever in other ways to be able to provide those free of charge to the students over here. If they want to serve Clackamas County, we are underserved financially, and those kids need that type of thing, so.
And it's also
But we
something-
don't have the general fund budget to be able to do that, unfortunately. We can, the best we can do is the 100,000 to RAC, then get back the turn that we do.
Yeah,
But
I
he
wouldn't-
knows how strongly we feel about it, and that's important to me.
And remember, we increased it. It used to be 80,000 when you look at the history.
Yeah,
And we
it's gone
increased it up
through,
to 100,000
it's gone through
because of
phases.
the
We brought it
Bloming
way
Act.
down one year and then took it back up the next year and then brought it down again and, whatever, but.
And
Yeah.
I can get there this year, as I said, and I'm looking that we
Okay.
have 3 folks from Clackamas County who evidently are on their board, but I still think this warrants kind of a closer look, particularly because of the, these programs. But again, is it really reaching the demographic that we as commissioners have
Exactly, it's not.
kind of wanted to help out?
I agree, it's not
you know.
reaching who we'd really want it to reach, in that. So,
Okay, well,
Mr. Feely?
into that.
I just want to make one comment on the 5.5 million one time in the sheriff's office. I mean, it's assigned there for next year's budget. I mentioned the other day that if the process that's going to take place doesn't result in anything, I would not assume that the sheriff is responsible for that, that we would have to balance the budget countywide. Anyway, having said that, I move that the committee approve the 2019-2020 budget for Clackamas County as amended and impose the county permanent tax rates of 2.4042 Clackamas County City and 2.9766 Clackamas County Rural, the public safety local option levy tax rate of 2.2480, and the amount of $4,979,000 for general obligation bond debt service.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the 2019-2000 budget for Clackamas County as amended, imposing the permanent tax rate of 2.4042 Clackamas County City and 2.9766 Clackamas County Rural, the public safety local option levy tax rate of 0.2480, and the amount of $4,979,000 for general obligation bond debt service.
You took the same class I did, you gotta read the whole motion back.
Yes, right.
Oh,
Yeah, which is
Thank
like,
goodness it's not super long.
right,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
thank
fucked up.
goodness, right? Yeah,
Can we have staff or someone list all the amendments to make sure that staff has them all?
to my recollection, there are two. One is the 50,000 out of small grants.
Reduce,
Three.
The VRF.
Are there three? And the VRF?
Two VRFs. No, it was one.
It was one
One,
motion.
yeah,
Yeah,
one motion including Damascus.
That's correct.
Right.
yeah.
And the reduction of the small grants from 300,000 to 250, with 50,000 going to children of incarcerated parents.
That's correct.
Those
And
are-
then the elected officials.
Right, the elected officials.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
thank you, yes, thank you very much, Haley. The elected officials
official
compensation.
And there was also a reclassified amount.
Make sure we're talking into microphones. They're signaling at us.
There was an amount reclassified from in the SDC fund that, from transfer to special payment of $1,555,000.
I don't remember
That was from a few days ago when DTD originally presented. There's a transfer that is planned to be made between the SDC fund and CCDA, or the development agency. Because it's a separate agency, it needs to be a special payment and not a transfer.
Did we
Gotcha.
act on that?
And the committee with the development agencies members
approved the corresponding amendment. And so I don't believe we've actually approved the amendment needed for the county budget
Yeah.
so
Okay.
that they match.
So that, would that need to be voted on now?
I believe so, and I have language for that.
You have language.
So we can amend,
Not yet. I don't know
we
if
can
he wants
amend
to
Mr.
bring it up.
Feely's
Me?
motion
Okay.
and my second with that
Yes.
procedurally.
Or
That
you
would
could
be fine.
withdraw your motion, they could make the amendment.
And then we have to read it all over again?
do the
Aren't you
amendment.
cute?
I also, a few of us have been talking about the small grants motion and amendment, and we feel that it needs to be revised with further detail. So perhaps I need to bring that one forward as well.
How do you propose it be revised?
We need to speak to where the funds will actually come from in the non-departmental budget, because that budget was already designed with only 250,000 in small grants. There's not 50,000 to take out of the small grants line. We need to take it out of a different line and allocate it to a line that will then provide it to the children of incarcerated parents.
And we know what line.
Can you do this when it comes back for adoption?
At the BCC?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Procedurally, yes.
Let's do that and go on
do-
with the vote.
Can I have a question? Can I say something?
Yes.
Can we just direct staff before the budget's adopted to find $50,000 somewhere to go to
Yeah.
children of incarcerated parents?
Yeah, that's
Can
what
we
we're thinking. And then when you guys adopt, then it can be
that
stated.
from anywhere?
Yeah.
Gary,
Yes.
I think Gary would like to recommend professional services and non-D has some flexibility.
Yeah.
We can find the money, yes.
Laurel, did you have a comment or a question?
I have an answer, so
Oh, I like
I walked
answers.
back in the room, I don't know where you are, but I have an answer on Northwest Housing Alternatives. Do you want it now, or is this not the right time?
The what?
Northwest Housing Alternatives.
Oh, there is, I didn't know where you were in your process.
Yeah.
I'll do it after your motion is done, because I don't
Thank
want to
you.
confuse you.
Okay, thank you.
So we need a motion
So
on
we
the
do need a motion for the one transfer, though,
SDCs.
the
SDC
SDCs.
transfer motion.
Yeah.
As an addendum to the motion to approve the budget, that's an addendum to your motion, is
Right.
procedurally.
The one for the Department of Transportation and Development?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
thank
I
you.
would,
Yeah,
I
and
would
if you-
amend my original motion to include what Jennifer just said.
Or is going to say?
Or going to say, well, say it now.
Okay. Amend the Department of Transportation and Development budget in the countywide TSDC so that $1,555,000 currently categorized as expense interfund transfer be recategorized as special payments.
So moved.
No. He's accepted. The
I
second,
moved it.
He's
the
gotta
second
accept the
accepts,
Part of
amendment.
my motion now.
and the second accepts the amendment.
All right, very good. There is an amended motion on the floor, and the amended motion includes the approval of the 1920 budget as originally amended, with the new amendment of a transfer of funds from Department of Transportation to Department to blah, blah, blah.
Help her out.
It's a recategorization of funds in the Department of Transportation and Development.
Yes, within reclassification within the Department of Transportation. Boy, I'm not doing well at this, am I?
You're doing excellent.
Also correct the motion to provide the money to the children of incarcerated parents and have that coming from professional services rather than from the small grants.
Yeah.
You don't
I
even
could.
need an
It's getting
amendment to
kinda
do that.
messy.
Thought we were gonna let
Can we
the
do that
board
later?
kind of,
It's in,
You actually, I don't believe, need to amend the budget to
Yeah, just.
make the payment out of a different,
right,
You don't.
yeah. We're
And
just,
if you do, you can do it when it comes back
right,
for adoption.
okay.
I
So
don't- this
that
is
is the motion on the table.
Yeah, it might be small.
Commissioner
special
Bernard, you have
payments.
conversation, and Commissioner Savas, and Mr. Caton? No? Okay, Commissioner Savas?
So does the approval of the budget presume that the administrator's budget message, inclusive of particularly the hiring freeze, incorporated into the budget recommendation? Yes, no.
I think he said it may include a hiring freeze.
No, that it, well,
Well,
that,
my,
I would
my
like,
motion does not include that.
So what it
You're
may
correct
be-
that that is in
yeah.
the administrator's message.
It's up to him to make that decision subsequent to.
You all
to the-
and
to the
how you
approval of the
do
budget.
that.
And it may be, instead of a hiring freeze, it may be just not replacing due to attrition.
Shill.
Yeah, yeah.
because his, also in his message was the ability to make exceptions as needed, which I think really speaks to all the other concerns we heard all along. So I guess my clarification is that, or is that not
Administrator
incorporated?
Schmidt, you have a comment, sir.
I put in my budget message, I used the term propose. It actually is my decision. I don't need your approval
I
to do this.
didn't think so. We've never
If you have
approved the
strong objections,
budget
I'd like to
message
hear it.
before.
But this is one of my, this is one of my opportunities to make sure that we're putting the brakes, so to speak, as of July 1st, so we don't start hiring people when there's a potential of staff reductions beginning fiscal year July 2020. So that is my plan, unless I hear all 10 of you, or a majority of you tell me don't do that, to enact a temporary hiring freeze as of July 1st, still to be determined what that looks like. Staff and I are going to start talking tomorrow with HR to see what that would look like. There'll be an exception process, of course, with what I've said before. I will not stop the business of county government. But as people retire or as positions become vacant, we need to review every single position. So I
Exactly.
plan on going forward with that unless I hear strong comments to the contrary. But again, that's a decision I can make as the administrator.
Thank you so much, sir. Mr. Caton.
Just point of clarification for me, I just want to review the parking lot items and make sure that we've, just double checked and make sure we've handled all the ones for this year and then the ones going forward that we have, plans for going forward with the future parking lot items
And the county
too.
administrator and his
will be
staff will handle the
addressed
ones for
going forward.
2021. And it looks to me like we've handled the 3 that we have up there for 1920.
I still think that the motions are a little screwed up, because my motion was to amend and take it out of small grants. Its motion still exists and then passed. So I think, we almost have to throw it out and start all over to make it clean. And so we could just drop the motion about the small grants and say instead, move that the administrator find $50,000, and you said out of professional services, to fund $50,000 to parents of incarcerated parents. Children of incarcerated parents.
Parents of incarcerated parents, yeah.
Children of incarcerated parents.
Well, that could be needed too, but this happens to be children of incarcerated
That would be,
parents.
I'm sorry to cause the confusion, that would be cleaner, and again, I apologize. I'm taking responsibility, it was an error. I accidentally put in the budget down to $250,000 for small grants, it should have been 300. But yes, if you were to clarify that, that would be appreciated. So the small
So,
grants is staying as is at 250 and then fine 50,000.
Yeah, that's the motion.
So point of order, do we need a vote to rescind the original motion? I would think that we do, but I am not 100% sure.
I think we should take a minute and write all these amendments down.
I'm going to withdraw my motion for approval with the understanding that staff over the next 10 minutes is going to type out a new draft motion that includes everything.
Okay.
Let's take a 10-minute break.
10-minute break.
Can you do that, boss?
Yes.
Yeah, and Sonia has.
So,
Commissioner
can we
Fisher.
hear what Laurel had for Northwest Housing Alternatives?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm happy to report. I just talked with Jill Smith, and a couple of things are happening. One is that the funding that they were talking about, that it comes from H3S, actually comes from the state. It's a pass-through. And so in the past, H3S has given that money to deserving nonprofits, but in our attempts to be more cognizant of where the monies are going and who it's going to, they came to the realization that in order to do this in a open, competitive way, they needed to do an RFP. And so they have an RFP on the street for sheltering services. The state has recently reprioritized, and they're putting more money into rapid rehousing than into sheltering. So ultimately, the pot that they are doing this RFP for is a bit smaller. So that part of what they were saying is true. Jill has every reason to believe that Northwest Housing Alternatives is going to put in a proposal for that RFP, and is poised to be a very strong candidate. But she just doesn't know how it's going to come out. There's a little bit less money available, but they are also a stellar candidate for the money. Another thing that she did tell me was that there was another sort of RFP for money from that marijuana PLP for other housing, and they didn't apply for that, and she couldn't figure that out because they would have been a very strong candidate for that as well.
We just have to make sure they know this.
Yeah.
Notice. I'm sure they do.
Yeah,
But
she met with them last week.
the funny thing is talk about rapid rehousing. The buildings are built. They could be rapidly housed.
Yeah, and they're fantastic.
Yeah.
Did you still have your card up,
Oh, sorry,
Commissioner
no, I
Fisher,
just
or-
wanted to
Okay,
hear what that
so
answer
let's
was.
take a 10-minute break. We'll be back at 4 o'clock, and we'll have a new motion. Other motions are off the table. This will superimpose over any other motions we've made today. How you like that? Talk to him for a second on that.
Before we make
The
a
Budget
a
Committee will
motion.
reconvene at this point in time. So, Mr. Caton?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask, I appreciate what Commissioner Savas had to say around the sheriff's budget ask and the increase. And I just want to point of clarification is if that $5 million stopgap is included in the budget proposal or not, or if there's some other or if it's not, or it's something that will be managed through the administrator going forward or not. I just wanted
It
to
is
point
included.
that out.
All of these one-time or ongoing funding I recommended on the last page of my budget message is included in the proposed budgets by departments. So if you were to oppose that, we'd be taking it out of the department
But
budget.
it's not an increase.
It's
a
not-
It's a
right.
replacement of ongoing revenue.
Correct, yes, right.
As a one-time
One-time, right.
Replacing
One-time
ongoing
thing.
one time of 5.5 million.
Yeah.
It's not a net increase to the sheriff's office.
But it'd be, I suppose, managed through the administrator's office going forward, is that
Well, going
basically,
forward, it
or
won't be
how?
there 'cause it's one time.
It's one-time
Through
only.
this year would be allocated
one
as
time.
needed, is that the
Yeah.
plan then?
I think I understand what you're trying to say,
Yeah.
yeah, I get it. Because I appreciate what Commissioner Savas had to say. I think he's been very thoughtful, and because we're all worried about this, and I think that he has worked hard to put forward other ideas. I think that I'm prepared to, I feel like we need to move ahead on this budget, but I think that his feedback on what, we have to be really careful moving forward, and his analysis, I think, is something that should continue to have a conversation after we finish this budget today.
And I certainly believe that that's the intent, so we're good to go. Mr. Feely, do you have other comments, or are you waiting to read? I believe she has that ready for you.
All right.
Here comes Jennifer.
And we gotta hand it off to Wilda so she can read it again.
Yeah.
Oh, wait,
Oops, format drive.
Oop, delete.
Your microphone's off. Tom, your microphone's off.
All right, I'm ready.
Mr. Feely, you have the microphone, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the committee approve the 2019-2020 budget for Clackamas County with the following amendments. To increase by $50,000 the non-departmental budget line payments to local government and other agencies, to provide funds for the Children of Incarcerated Parents Organization, and reduce the professional service line a corresponding amount. Amend the Department of Transportation budget in the countywide TSDCs program so that $1,550,000 currently categorized as an expense interfund transfer be recategorized as special payments. Amend the budget, amend the Department of Transportation I'm sorry. Amend the budget to reflect salary adjustments recommended by the Compensation Board for elected officials, except to increase the commissioner's salary by 3.5% rather than the 5.5% recommended. Amend the Department of Transportation budget to reflect the anticipated vehicle registration fees by $5,436,706 to be housed in a new community road fund program, and another $102,500 to be housed in the existing Damascus roads program in revenue and expense categories as presented, and impose the county permanent tax rates of 2.4042 Clackamas County City and 2.9766 Clackamas County Rural, the public safety local option levy tax rate of 0.2480, and the amount of $4,979,000 for general obligation bond debt service.
Second.
Okay.
You got that?
Sure. I'm going to abbreviate it.
Scrolly keys.
Okay. It has been moved and seconded that the committee approve the 2019-2020 budget for Clackamas County with amendments as noted in the reading and in the report. That the, use the touch screen. Yeah, where are we coming down here? Oh. I gotta get the text.
How do you get it to go down?
I gotta get the levy in there. Yeah, it's gotta be,
Oh, Krista.
Use the screen.
it is touchscreen. It wasn't moving. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
And impose the county permanent tax rates of 2.4042 Clackamas County City and 2.9766 Clackamas County Rural, the public safety local option levy tax rate of 0.2480, and the amount of $4,979,000 for general obligation bond debt service. Any comments? Seeing none, oh, excuse me, Commissioner Savis?
I just want to note that I do support the amendments. And going forward, I strongly advise that we don't cut any sworn officer positions, and again, prefer they not be cut. And in efforts to maintain a good level of public safety, the boots on the ground we talked about earlier, I just want to express also that my comments about an hour and a half ago were a list of things I think we need to talk about, 9 of which we didn't cover. But I will just say that 40 minutes ago, when the first draft of a scripted motion circulated, I realized that there was not much interest in that, so I will not be supporting the budget. I think it needs to be a sustainable budget, and it's not sustainable. And I think that's really our role and responsibility, but that's my personal opinion.
Thank you. All those in favor of the adoption of the budget in the motion as it was presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. So
Nay.
we have 9 support and 1 opposed. Motion carries. The budget is adopted or is approved. Thank you. Y'all get to adopt it. Yeah,
Gary,
you can hammer out some
congratulations
details.
on your
Yeah,
first budget.
Thank you, Administrator Smith. Sir,
If I may, I would like to thank all the staff, the 22 departments and their leadership who put together their proposed budgets, to our finance staff, Krista, Jennifer, Haley, Roxanne, Gian, and all the rest behind the scenes who put this together, Laurel Buttman for her work on the budget every year. It's a bridge transition budget, so really this was the easy work. The challenging work starts now and for the next 11 months, and we'll work together with each of you to help have a sustainable budget. It's required, it's the law, and it's my expectation. So I thank you, Budget Committee, for your work, tireless work, especially our public members who volunteered 2 weeks of your time to be here. We're grateful for that, and our county commissioners, of course, as well, for your work. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, sir, and I think I speak for the other members of the citizen group on the Budget Committee, as well as the county commissioners, to say we look forward to working with you in this coming year to see how we can help you achieve some great results. So thank you very much. It's complicated, and it will all come together in the
Thank you,
end. So
Chair Weldon Parks.
I had fun.
All
Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, I just wanted
sir.
just to concur with Administrator Schmidt's compliments. The staff did a fantastic job, and I really appreciate the new energy and the new faces, and provided a lot of information. I was hoping we could utilize some of that this afternoon, or actually recommended we actually get in tomorrow, but they did a lot of work, and just
Got a lot done.
thought we could put some of that to use tomorrow, but that's not the case.
Commissioner Humberston.
I'd like to request of the administrator that the items on the parking lot for 2021 be included in your discussions as you go forward on working on that sustainable budget, and that you report back on those specific items to this budget committee at quarterly budget committee meetings.
Yes.
And then I had a conversation with Krista a little while ago, and our cohort, Multnomah County and Washington County, both have sophisticated software that does forecasting, and her predecessors did not have that, which is one of the reasons why we find ourselves with different forecasts going forward. Also pointed out to me that they have an economist in each one of those counties that works on these things, and that their staffing situation is they have 2 ladies. In a department that should have 7. So as we look at this whole process, and I know we can't fill all of those slots, so don't misunderstand me, but we need to recognize that we are behind the times with respect to software that we're going to be needing to get accurate forecasts going forward. So as you go forward, consider that, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
I would concur with that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. A reminder before we adjourn the meeting that we can return our budget books to you, correct? And also a reminder that as per the open meeting laws, any notes or anything like that that you've taken on separate pieces of paper or tablets or whatever should remain either with you and keep them in case they're ever needed, or turn them back over to the finance department, right? Okay. With that, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for an interesting couple of weeks. So appreciate it all very much. And we are adjourned.